Welcome to Mrs. True Crime. Today's video is an in-depth look into the unsolved disappearance of Dorothy Dottie Caylor. It's a tale of frustration and plot holes. If you are triggered by anything dealing with domestic abuse, feel free to click off this video. Perhaps check out my gaming channel, Retell Me Games, for some lighthearted content. If not, I'm Nicole. Let's get started. Late author, teacher, and poet Maya Angelou once said, "We write for the same reason that we walk, talk, climb mountains, or swim the oceans, because we can." We have some impulse within us that makes us want to explain ourselves to other human beings. Dorothy Dottie Caylor wrote down every moment of her life, whether it was to-do lists that she scribbled on calendars or random book titles she'd come across. She continued to write notes until they became detailed letters of anger and passion, and even then, Dottie refused to stop allowing her pen to stretch across paper. Dottie wasn't the only writer in her home, however. Her husband, Jewel Caylor, wrote letters. Bitter, passionate, aggressive letters. And oh, did he have a lot to say. But let's back up a bit. Dottie Caylor was born Dorothy Mae Rusnick on June 9, 1944, to Joseph and Susan Rusnick in Sheridan, Ohio. She has one older sister, Diane. Diane was known as the confident one, whereas Dottie was a bit of a loner, suffering from self-doubt. At the age of 19, she got the courage to move out of her parents' home and take a job at a Cleveland firm as a legal secretary. After a year, she left Cleveland with her sister's blessing and moved to Berkeley, California with her and her best friend Joni. In a new place with new faces, Dottie teetered back and forth with her self-confidence, weight, and emotions towards her sister. After a few years, Dottie was left alone as her sister moved in with a boyfriend and Joni married. For anyone with self-esteem issues, being alone can be a nightmare. And as any big sister would, Diane helped Dottie get back on her feet in a new living space with new roommates. Though Dottie was going about everything at her own pace, it would all come to a halt in 1970 when she met and fell in love with 33-year-old Jim Rupp. Jim Rupp was an entomologist who knew how to charm. Problem was, he couldn't charm Dottie's friends or family. But Dottie didn't care. She was in love with him, and no one could take that away from her, even if she would later find out that Jim Rupp wasn't exactly who he claimed to be. Jim Rupp was really named Jewel Caylor, and he was a married man with a 10-year-old daughter. Dottie confronted him, and Jewel confessed, but insisted that he was getting a divorce from his wife. The divorce in question took 4 years to become a reality. In 1975, Dottie and Jewel were married in Jewel's parents' backyard, with only 4 people in attendance. That same year, they moved into a 3-bedroom ranch-style Concord home that would become Dottie's safe haven for years to come. Though Jewel lied about his name, he didn't lie about his occupation. He was indeed an entomologist who worked for the U.S. Forest Service. His particular field caused him to travel for weeks at a time, leaving Dottie isolated in their home. It was here that her low confidence began to rumble in her mind, feeding her with thoughts and negative possibilities that soon developed into agoraphobia, the fear of open spaces. It was during this time that Dottie began to write down any and everything that she felt held importance. She wrote down shopping lists and chore lists. Her purse was stuffed with phone numbers and other scribbles of paper. If she had to leave the house, she placed extra checks, her bee sting kit, as she was allergic to bees, cash, phone numbers, and anything else she felt she would need while away. But Dottie's writings didn't stop here. At first, it was just letters to Jewel's parents, blaming them for his behavior. But over time, she began to write to Jewel's many mistresses. Dottie was cautious and very observant of everything around her. She made notes of when Jewel left town and when he would return, becoming aware of phone calls, motel rooms, and dinners. She did manage the household accounts after all. She wrote letters upon letters to those she felt were intruding upon her marriage, and would receive replies back confirming her suspicions. yet she stayed with Jewel. But as the years wore on, so did the marriage. On Thanksgiving, 1981, the couple came to a breaking point after an argument over a checkbook where Dottie grabbed a pair of scissors and Jewel hit her hard with a small wooden stand. Both claimed self-defense. Dottie drove herself to the hospital, while Jewel called police. Photos of Dottie's face were taken for evidence, revealing a large gash above her left eye, a swollen face, and puffy lips. That night she stayed at a battered woman's shelter. Over the course of 4 years, Dottie began to plan her life away from Jewel. She began attending church and enrolled in a Women in Transition support group where she befriended Shelley Wilson. The two became best friends, talking on the phone and going out to dinner and movies together. Dottie was finally getting a handle on her agoraphobia and getting a new lease on life. But Dottie kept all of this, including her friendships, away from her husband.
She had a secret existence that I knew nothing about, and she wanted it that way. I only began to become aware of it, near the time that she disappeared. I wasn't even aware of it. I was just suspicious.
But Jewel wasn't exactly innocent either. While Dottie was working on getting her life together, Jewel was working on a life without Dottie. In May 1984, Jewel took a business trip to Colorado, where he met a woman who worked for the Colorado division of the U.S. Forest Service. The two flirted and went on a few dates during his time there. When he returned to California, he began to write her long, passionate love letters. They spent Thanksgiving together, and on Christmas 1984, he asked her to marry him, and she agreed. The two bought a ring, but there was just that small problem of setting a date. While Jewel's fiancé waited patiently for him to commit to a spring or summer wedding, Dottie had come into $5,000 and had opened a bank account in her name. She also applied for credit cards and rented a post office box. Dottie then also asked Shelley to keep a file cabinet for her, where she placed evidence of all of Jewel's affairs inside, and in 1985, Jewel and Dottie were discussing a divorce. Jewel's San Francisco job had been eliminated, and he was taking a position in Salt Lake City, and Dottie refused to go with him. All she asked out of the marriage was to have their home. It was her safe haven, and she spent more time and energy at the house than he did, after all. Dottie was to buy out Jewel for half of the house, much to Jewel's dismay, but everything was a go. Reportedly, on June 12, 1985, Jewel drove Dottie to Pleasant Hill BART station to help her overcome more of her fears. Dottie took an overnight bag and her purse, and Jewel watched her disappear around a corner. This is the last time anyone would see Dottie Caylor. No one knew Dottie was missing until Shelley continuously phoned the Caylor residence for 2 days without an answer. On the third day she called, Jewel answered and told her that Dottie wasn't there and he didn't know where she was. Shelley called everyone she knew that knew Dottie, including Dottie's sister Diane. The two frantically tried to locate her, thinking of all the possibilities of where she would go to. They arrived at Dottie's home, to a freshly painted home, in a large moving van. Jewel was leaving the state for his new job and renting out the space, taking all of Dottie's belongings with him. Diane and Shelley tried to grab all that they could that belonged to Dottie, arguing that Jewel needed to report her missing. After 5 days without word from Dottie, Jewel finally reported her missing. He told the police that he dropped her off at 8 a.m. on June 12th and watched her disappear behind a corner. Jewel said the following day he returned to the station and found Dottie's car parked beside his with all of her belongings except her bead kit inside. He said he left notes inside the car, urging Dottie to get in contact with him. When the car remained in the same place for a while, he began to move it so that she wouldn't get a ticket. For all accounts, the police couldn't find any foul play, and Jewel Caylor left town 2 weeks later.
It was hell living with Dottie. It was hell having her disappear the way that she did. And yet, since I've gotten here and gotten settled and into a new job, that whole problem is behind me. Things are really pretty good.
Around the time of Dottie's disappearance, Jewel phoned his Colorado fiancée, telling her that he couldn't see her because the tenants in his rental house had left a mess and he was going to have to clean it. He allegedly stated that it looked as if someone had killed an animal in the kitchen. 10 years later, the Caylor's neighbors would find a rusted meat cleaver with the handle wrapped in duct tape leaning against the fence hidden by ivy. They turned it over to authorities. Once Jewel had officially moved away, he contacted the Colorado woman asking her to come to West Jordan, Utah for Christmas '85 with him and his daughter. The woman and her son took a trip to Utah and was looking forward to spending time with Jewel until he confessed that he was already married. His daughter asked him how he could even consider marrying someone else when Dottie was still missing. To that, Jewel went on to describe a terrible life with Dottie to his fiancé. All of this information was a lot to take in, but even more was what Jewel's daughter showed her. In a spare room of Jewel's home were stacks of boxes with Dottie's belongings. Photos and personal papers in Dottie's handwriting were inside. On the calendar were notes of Jewel's comings and goings, and every mark was the time he was with her in Colorado. The next morning, she questioned him, and Jewel allegedly said, "She's gone. I'm glad she's gone, and if she's dead someplace, it's good riddance." The next morning, the Colorado woman and her son left the home. From August 1986 to Christmas, Jewel wrote letters upon letters, one being 12 pages long, to the Colorado woman professing his love. Eventually, when she didn't respond, the letter stopped, and Jewel found a new companion who he has been with for the last 20 plus years. In 2003, Jewel filed for divorce from Dottie, citing willful desertion, but Diane filed a suit and the divorce was set aside, citing that Dottie was dead at the time of the divorce. Jewel retired from the U.S. Forest Services and has since tried to run for Utah State Legislature, but later dropped out. He told the Times in the early 2000s as a final comment that a divorce from Dottie would eliminate all problems. Meanwhile, Diane and the rest of Dottie's friends haven't given up hope. Diane filed a civil lawsuit that Dottie be declared legally dead, and Diane would be named executor of the estate. Though a judge found evidence that Dottie is dead, the court still awaits findings from the police. Until then, the case is in limbo. The case of Dorothy Dottie Caylor may be cold, but is still very much open, with Jewel Caylor as being a person of interest. Anyone with any information is asked to call 925-603-5836. No matter where Dottie is currently, I can only hope that she's without fear and anxiety. I truly hope she's at peace. I'm Mrs. Shoe Crime, and remember to be kind, be loud, be aware. For more information about Dottie Caylor, why not check out some of these awesome links? And if you like what you saw on her today, why not drop a like and a comment? Maybe subscribe while you're here? I make new videos every Tuesday and Friday, and you don't want to miss what's in store.